Hello, my name is Jonathan Forster, and welcome to the Multi-Story Thinking podcast on interior design. I'm an interior designer and educator. My job is to improve quality of life and productivity by helping people to create beautiful and practical spaces to live and work in. The Multi-Story Thinking podcast takes an educational slant to the interior design world. If, like me, you are curious about how things are done within the industry, want to know how people got their breaks and how they've developed their careers, and get some top tips and advice, then this is the podcast for you. So sit back, relax, as we help unravel the mysteries of interior design. Dan Einzig is the founder of Mystery, an award-winning specialist brand design agency in London and Los Angeles. Mystery specialise in creating customer-centric brands in the hospitality and food and beverage sectors. Dan has also co-ventured, co-founded and co-partnered a portfolio of consumer lifestyle brands in which he has equity holdings and has a direct influence on through his brand development consulting. I spoke to Dan in his Santa Monica home via Zoom. In this episode we discover why brands are like people and how developing brands with personalities helps create emotive connections with customers, how creating joint ventures can build stronger business relationships, the importance of writing down a design methodology, why working backwards provides a structure to developing a design and making decisions, and the policy that on every project you must have fun.
Been here 7 years now.
7 years, blimey. Yes, so I think when I saw you last, you had already moved out there. So
right, yes, indeed, yeah. So I was flip-flopping backwards and forwards almost monthly for the first 4 years.
Yeah,
which was exciting, but also tiring. And luckily I don't need to do that anymore. I did actually. I managed to sell the London part of the business.
Right. Okay.
And continue to own and operate the US side.
Yeah, and it's still it's still the same name, but totally different businesses. Are you connected at all with that London business now, or
only in spirit? You know, I obviously wish them very well, but no, I'm not working with them at the moment. I'm obviously open to that, but. No, I'm connected in spirit. I'm still the founder of that business, but that business has sort of got a life of its own. But we're not in regular touch. My focus really is on the US side of the business.
Yeah, and that seems to be doing really well. I mean, while I was waiting, I was looking online, as you do, the stuff that you're involved with. There's such a range of brands and companies that you've been designing for, but also becoming involved with as part of a team. You know, I think that's really exciting, and that sort of entrepreneurial thing. I was just thinking back to when I first met you. What really struck me about meeting you is the way in which you talked about your business and how you operate and create brands in a way that I just at that time had never heard anybody from the graphics and branding sector talking like that. You know, and it was really refreshing because it sort of chimed with how we were thinking about space and branding from an interiors perspective. You were coming at it from a more design, brand and graphic communication perspective. But that was really exciting, and I don't expect you to remember what you said to me, but that philosophy that you've developed over time, where did that first come from, and how did it sort of initiate itself?
It's a really good question. It's a philosophy that has evolved over time. You know, I think it comes from experience. Initially, we were a pure, branding and graphics agency, and we found ourselves working more and more with interior designers and architects to create restaurant concepts. And because our main focus transitioned from music in the early days designing CD packaging and tour merchandise and all those sorts of things, sort of making bands into brands, sort of transitioned into, my other passion, which was for food and beverage and hospitality. So working, sort of collaborating with interior designers and architects introduced us to different ways of thinking as well. So I think that sort of co-creating definitely sort of opens my mind. And I've one of the things I've enjoyed most about my career is collaboration with other creatives, whether that's an architect or a furniture designer or textile designers or whomever, artists even on a recent project. But I think where the philosophy came from is just really trying to articulate the ideas and the approaches that we'd been doing and having for a long time. So what we did was we decided to write them down effectively and sort of define what our approach is, define what our philosophy is. And I think that I do remember that first meeting we had, and that I remember being struck because you had such a similar philosophy in a sense, and that philosophy being around having a what's commonly called now, it's now become part of design culture, but a brand experience. At that time was kind of a novel idea in a sense. People hadn't really been discussing it like that. And the idea that brands connecting with people on an emotive level, that was what really excited me. I've always been involved with emotive products, and music is such an amazingly emotive product. It makes you feel something, can make you feel in a variety of different ways. And likewise, food and beverage, hospitality is such an emotive experience as well, and one that one of the reasons I've loved it is because you can when you're designing a restaurant or a hotel, you're creating every touch point, you're touching every sense of the consumer or the customer or the guest, from their taste buds to their what this place smells like, their visually, what they're listening to. They are literally consuming the brand, and that's always been really exciting. So how do you create brands that people connect with? Our philosophy was, well, people connect with people. And I think, I don't know whether I explained it in these terms when we first met all those years ago, but as it's evolved, I've realized that that's really what the essence is. People connect with people that they relate to or they aspire to. And so we try and create brands with personality like people, and personalities that people do connect with, personalities that inspire them, or that remind them of, fill them with a sense of excitement or nostalgia, or entertain them, or some sort of way of some sort of emotive connection. And then and the reason for all that, is very commercial. The reason is because people make their purchase decisions emotively. They think they're being rational, but the bottom line is, 90% of purchase decisions are made emotively. And so if you've got that emotive connection, you're driving those revenues and those commercial results.
Yeah, that's the real power of the design input. I think that's really compelling when you break it down and think about it. What's really exciting, I think, about what you do is the way in which you're covering everything. You talk about designing everything, but you're able to seamlessly put graphics, brand, palette of materials, spaces together, rather than lots of designers aspire to do that and have to go up with partnerships, and it's slightly disjointed. But working with all that in-house, that's a powerful tool, isn't it, to deliver the experience and make it consistent and coherent.
Well, again, that was another reason for writing down our philosophy and our approach, and actually kind of creating a methodology around it. Because in order to scale it, and in order to define, fundamentally, at the heart of the philosophy, or at the heart of the vision, is having a really coherent brand vision, right? So the positioning, the understanding of who the customer is, and what the brand stands for, its values, what sort of personality it has, what type of, what the market opportunity is, where is the battleground that we're fighting, who is the customer. And so having that really, really clear brand vision, having it articulated, means that it can drive decision making, not just in terms of branding and graphics, but in terms of interiors, in terms of marketing strategy, but also wider through the organization, through the client's organization as well. In that it can help them with, if it's a restaurant brand, it can help them guide their property strategy. It can help them guide their culture. It can help them guide their recruitment policy and their even affect how they operate. Because if you've got a really, really clear idea of what the brand vision is, you can make everybody in the organization working in these different areas can be pulling in the same direction. And that worked not just for our clients, but for us, by ensuring that the interior designers on the team, were pulling in the same direction as the branding designers and the packaging designers. That sort of brand strategy, that vision, is the decision-making tool at the end of the day.
That's what's guiding you and helping make those decisions as you move forward. So the process of doing that, I know you've got quite a sort of well-rehearsed routine, I suppose, of understanding how businesses tick. Did you find difficulty in translating that into the interior design for clients with interior design projects, or because it's something that I think is more familiar in the brand development and the more graphic sort of end of the spectrum? But when you're applying that to space, did it work as well, or did you have trouble trying to convince people to adopt that approach?
Do you know what? Recruiting interior designers and working either with creatives in-house or collaborating with out-house creatives, because here in the US it's a slightly different model. I collaborate with architects and interior designers out of the business, but the partners we choose, whether they're inside or outside, the reason they become part of the team and the reason that we collaborate is because they share that same philosophy. And so we haven't really had trouble, or if we have, we've moved on from those partnerships, or they haven't continued, because I think it is about a shared vision. And if someone doesn't believe that consumer experience is at the heart of their interior, then it doesn't really fit with our process. We're not really designing interiors, we're designing an event, right? We're designing a memory for someone later. We're helping them have an experience that, whether it's at a party or whether it's an intimate romantic dinner, whatever it is, we're helping create an experience for them. And so when you think about it like that, the interior design and the branding, it's all the same, it's all together, because we're all focused on that. What is the customer going to feel like when they're in that space?
How do you go about defining that then, understanding what is the memory that people want to go away with? What's the process of working towards that?
So we actually work backwards. It's kind of quite interesting. We try and imagine a number of scenarios of what people might say having been to the hotel or the restaurant, or more recently, we've been working a lot in the legalized cannabis sector, which we can talk about. But creating sort of high-end dispensaries or shops, basically retail environments. And so we work backwards from how might they recommend it? How might they promote it to their friends? How might they talk about it or tweet about it or recommend it on Yelp or whatever? And so we actually write down what we aspire those recommendations to be, and then fundamentally just figure out a way of creating an experience that will deliver that recommendation.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because that's the that vision board, isn't it, of where you want to end up at, and setting that destination as a starting point to the project and working backwards. You've got a clear vision of where you want to get to. I think that's really powerful. It's a bit.
I think that's the same in life, isn't it?
Yeah,
I feel
it
like
reminds me a lot of some of those coaching approaches, to how to sort yourself out and achieve what you want to achieve. Basically, set yourself a goal, imagine yourself being at that end result, and then the steps become easier to find and define.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what I don't think it's in the same way that brands are like people, I believe they should, they need to be like people. They need to have a kind of personality, and they need to have a mission, something that's that the company believes in. In the same way that having a goal for your life is just as important, as having a goal for whatever project it is you're working on. The clearer that vision, I think the easier it is to find those steps. And sometimes, there are a number of different journeys you could take to get to that end vision. So it's still a very fluid, creative process. Although there's a sort of really clearly defined methodology, it could go in a number of different directions, and that's what keeps it so exciting and so interesting in a way.
Different user groups within the target market, haven't you? That's one way of differentiating.
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Unless it's a super niche, concept that's only targeting a very, very specific person, or then absolutely, there's always going to be a variety of people to attract.
I'm really interested in the cannabis industry, partly because that must be a real challenge to create something out of what many people think is a dangerous product or is illegal in many places. What's the first step of that then? How did you vision the recommendations for that product?
The first thing is that cannabis becoming legalized in California. I mean, and it's now legal in about, I think it's 23 states or 28 states. I forget. Every month there's another state legalizing it. So it's really sort of a momentum that's picking up. One of the reasons I wanted to get involved was partly because it's actually, by legitimizing it and putting some sort of professional kind of approaches in place, you're removing a big part of the danger from the product. For example, it's a very, very highly regulated industry. So the product itself is tracked from seed to the time it's in the customer's hand. That the whole way, the process that it's grown, the growing, the distribution, the manufacturing, if it's turned into some sort of product like a gummy or a tincture, and then through to the retail, and then through to into the customer's hand. So it's a highly, highly regulated. It's extremely age appropriate. So everyone going into a retail store is checked for ID, and the packaging is all very highly regulated in what it can say, but also how easy or difficult it is to open. So it's all childproof. And so none of that obviously was happening in the black market. Products themselves were being produced in very shady environments, not regulated environments. The sorts of products that I'm working with are produced in food grade environments. You could literally eat off the floor. These places are immaculate. And the professionalism that's being brought to the industry, not just in terms of manufacturing, but across all the different categories, is taking it. It's basically making it a very safe proposition, because not only is it produced in a more regulated way, but it's labeled in a way that you know exactly what you're getting. In the olden days of the black market, you didn't know what it was. It was whatever the dealer told you it was, and you had to just trust that person. Now on the packaging, it explains exactly what strain of flower it is. It explains where it was grown and how it was grown, whether it was an organic compound. It explains how strong the THC, which is the psychoactive compound in cannabis that gets you high. It explains how much of that is in each product, and it explains what the other bioactive cannabinoids are as well. So, and then of course, because it's now legal, you get a bunch of consumer reviews as well, in the same way that you do with every other product in the world these days. Yeah. So you're getting a much more kind of trustworthy product created in a much safer environment for people to choose how they consume. And the interesting thing about the cannabis industry that's really struck me is that the people involved in it are, the legacy people are very authentic, genuine lovers, I want to say, but they're more than fans of the flower, of the plant. There's a culture within the industry of peace and love. I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, but it's authentic, and it's very appealing to be part of that. Obviously, it's being commercialized now, and peace and love goes a long way. But obviously, there are now, what comes with the legalization and the professionalization is, companies that look at, that operate in a much more commercial way as well. So I think it's been fascinating. I've been involved, for a few years now, and helped develop some retail concepts, which again, these are like Apple stores. These are really conceptual customer experiences designed specifically to kind of move away from the old kind of backroom deals, to creating something of a aspirational lifestyle, and representing the industry in the most positive light. And then we've also, I'm also working with a company called Cannabistry, who are an amazing bunch of world-class scientists who have developed proprietary technologies that help either extract the oil from the plant, or nano emulsion technologies, which are about how you take the bioactive compounds and find a way of taking the oil and making it mix with water effectively, which obviously water and oil obviously separate. So having a technology that can do that allows to create drinks and beverages. So these guys have created 3 or 4 really amazing technology platforms that they've built products on top of. And then my role has really been to help them take those products and bring them to market. And so now I'm finding myself kind of back in, sort of less of the interior element and more of the branding and packaging, but also a lot of the marketing as well.
Yeah.
And then when the marketing is really interesting, because that does link very closely to a kind of experience that someone might have within a music gig or a restaurant or hotel, where they are, where you're creating that experience again.
I mean, it must be quite exciting to be involved in that emergent industry, and being able to shape the way it's perceived. And that's essentially what your role is, isn't it? To shape people's perception of space or products or experiences.
Yeah, it is exciting. I mean, it's also super challenging, which is kind of enjoyable as well in its own slightly sadistic way.
Yeah.
But because the industry is kind of inventing itself as it goes, as we develop, it's we're sort of helping write the rules. I mean, obviously it's hugely regulated, as I said, but yeah, it is really exciting, and it's it's growing at such a rate as well, which is also there's a momentum and an energy that just reminds me of the days of when casual dining started to take off in London sort of 20 years ago. There was this sort of momentum that built up around that, and you started to see these chains appear, and and more people eating out on a much more regular basis, and it becoming not necessarily a special occasion experience, but more of an everyday experience. And I think it reminds me of that. It reminds me of the music business, the way that everyone in it was just so passionate about the product and about about music at that time. Yeah, it is exciting to be part of, and one feels that it's I wouldn't be in the slightest bit surprised. In fact, I'm kind of expect that at one point in maybe 10, 20 years time, it'll just be globally legal.
Yeah,
because it's actually a very safe product when it's properly managed. It's a very natural product. A lot of the products we work with are all natural and even organic. They have medicinal benefits. So we have a wellness brand called The Root of It All, and it's all natural drops that you put under your tongue, and each one has a sort of functional benefit. So one is to help people sleep. It's a major problem in the Western world. People don't seem to be able to sleep. So this is actually a natural alternative to, the sort of sleeping pills that people take, which are kind of pharmaceutical. Who knows what's in them?
Yeah.
So I'm excited particularly about that area. That's very much kind of the future of cannabis, I think, in the wellness space. But that's still quite a long way off, in reality. But it's definitely getting there.
Yeah, and I've read a lot about your co-ventures that you set up, and just explain a bit more how that works out. I know in the past I've been working with companies, and they're sort of reluctant to pay the money to get the design work sometimes, and I guess this is a way of stepping around that to create a different type of relationship where you're investing in a sense in the business by designing, and that seems to have worked really well for you.
Yeah, it really came. It's the idea of basically building a portfolio of co-ventures, which is what we've done. It's taken a long time, but it's really about. It's not so much about just a different way of being paid. It's actually about investment, like you say. It's about finding partners that you really believe in, who've got the potential that you think for to place a bet with. Effectively, that's what you're doing. That's what any kind of investment is, if you like. But yeah, we've built a small portfolio, and not obviously not all of them work out. There's 100 different reasons why a business might not sort of make it through to the end. But yeah, it's been a fascinating ride, and it really started with the belief that what we were doing as kind of branding people was adding huge amounts of value to our clients' businesses.
Yeah.
And the clients that recognized that and recognized what, the value that we could bring were interested in that sort of conversation, the conversation that says, hey, rather than just kind of having a contractual, we pay you for services and you bring them to us arrangement, rather than that, having something more like a partnership, more like, an ongoing relationship where we can bounce ideas, we can advise, or even continue to supply services in a way that links us and ensures that not only are we fully committed to them as a client, because obviously any agency has a roster of clients, right? And everybody wants to feel like they're the most important client. And so by partnering, they do, there's obviously a benefit to that in terms of the attention they get from the agency. So there was a number of different benefits for both sides, really. The opportunity to invest, because that is definitely how I see it. I see it as in the same way that if you were putting money into a business, into a startup, you'd want to research it and really believe in it. It's not really just another way of getting paid, because the reality is, very often with these businesses, they don't have an exit. You don't get a payout.
Yeah.
So it's as much about wanting to mitigate that risk, but also it's as much about kind of wanting to support people that you really believe in. And I think that's really the approach that I've tried to take over time, is really, really understanding that it's as much about the founder, the person, as it is about anything else. It's really, a business plan. I don't think I've ever seen a business plan actually turn out the way that it was presented. Okay. Yeah. It doesn't mean to say it doesn't work. It could work, but in a different way. So the business plan is just really a tool that shows people that you've thought as much as you can about this, this potential business. It gives any investor kind of confidence that this person's taking it seriously. I don't think anyone thinks it's going to be exactly like that, but that if they're going to take that part seriously, they're going to take running the business seriously. And so the business plan is one thing, but really that can change. So it's the people you're really investing in, especially at startup level. We're talking seed funding.
Yeah.
You know, we're really at the very beginning stages before very often they've even got a name for their business, because that's what we help them with.
Yeah.
You know,
That so getting into those kind of relationships must require a huge amount of trust between the parties. And it must take longer to set up? You've got to get to know them better, I suppose, do you, to see whether it's going to gel?
yeah, yeah, you do. I mean, you definitely don't want to rush into these things, but I think it's worth that investment of time, either to avoid, you know, a potential, you know, misstep, or to ensure that you are, you know, that you are really aligned. You know, I definitely approach with caution, and it's certainly not every opportunity that presents itself, you know, for potential co-venture gets done that way. You know, it doesn't happen as often as you might think. You know.
Yeah. And do you at what point does that sort of discussion happen? Because people are people coming to you knowing that that's an option, or is that something that evolves out of the discussion as you present different ways to engage?
It depends how we are introduced or how we find each other, but I'd say, you know, a good proportion of people now know that that's one of our, you know, that's a potential option to discuss, because of the way that, you know, because of the portfolio we've built and the way that we've marketed ourselves, I guess. But other people are unaware of it, and then are surprised. And you know, there are a bunch of people that really are not interested in that relationship at all. They just want a contractual service, and that's absolutely fine. I mean, that's the core of our business. But I think, you know, where there's someone that truly values what we do and understands the value of a long-term partnership, and someone that we believe, or that I believe, has real potential, then it's a conversation, you know, worth having and exploring. And those are always exciting to have, even if they don't, you know, fully materialize.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of working. I think that, and what you're saying about the value of design, I think it's always worth more than you can ever charge for it, almost, isn't it? If it works.
If it works, it is.
Yeah.
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 I mean, you know, not all design is great, but you know, one would like to think that it should be. But what I'm often asked is how do you approach that conversation? How do you have that conversation with a potential client? And if they are, I think that the truth is that the first one is the hardest. Once you've got one co-venture in your, you know, under your belt, that conversation is just, it's a natural conversation you just have with any potential prospect or any potential client, because you have a case study. It's always the first one that's really hard. Once you've got it, then it's not just an idea anymore. It's actually something that you've put into practice. So anyone thinking of doing that, I would say they just need to keep looking for the right partner, and then proposing that, if that's a route they want to go down. We've had a number of different types of co-ventures where we've actually been paid and taken equity, or we've done some where we've only got equity. We've done them where we've only been paid. Obviously, that's the normal model. And then there's, you know, other ways that you can sort of slice and dice it. But fundamentally, it is about, you know, you just do need to think of it as an investment, because not only do you do the job, you know, do the project, but you are, I think, way more emotively connected yourself once you've got that little slice of the pie to, you know, overinvest your time. So you might think to yourself, okay, my time's worth X for a typical project like this. Therefore, that's we could trade that for the same equivalent value of shares. But I assure you that it's X times 2 really is what it is, because that's how much more effort you're going to put in when you've got a piece of the action.
Yeah.
And also, that's one of the reasons that clients like it, because they know that as soon as you have a skin in the game,
Yes.
as they call it,
Yeah.
that you're committed. You know, they have your full commitment on a different level. You know, that's not to say that a regular client doesn't get full commitment. It's just that you find an extra level for when you're actually kind of co-venturing.
Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, it's that, like you say, the investment of your time and the long-term success are all kind of wound together, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from an investment perspective, like, if you're putting your money into stocks and shares, like, or if you're putting them into Bitcoin or whatever you're investing in, you generally have zero kind of influence over the outcome of that investment.
Mm.
It's led by the market or that business. Whereas when you invest, when you co-venture with a partner in their startup, and you're able to bring your experience and your vision, you actually do have an influence on the outcome of that. You're not in control of it, because obviously there's 100 other important factors to any business, but you definitely have more, control, I guess.
Yeah.
And that to me is exciting, rather than just being a sort of completely passive investor and hoping for the best.
Yes.
I feel like you've got sort of a chance to help make it happen.
Well, definitely, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, I always think that when you pay a designer, you're getting value, aren't you? That's the principle of it. And it's our role to deliver as much value as possible. And if you're in as part of the team, then it's in your interest, isn't it? I'm interested in why and how you ended up in Santa Monica, because I'm not even sure I've even asked you the question, but suddenly you're in America. Is there a difference in the way in which the industry operates out there? And also, I just wondered, I was just looking at some of the pictures of the projects. They seem to look amazing. They've obviously photographed well, but I thought maybe the quality of light makes your interiors look more spectacular in California than it does in I don't know.
Do you know what? It's funny you should say that, because the light here is noticeably different. And for someone who appreciates the quality of light, you will notice when you come to the West Coast that it is a beautiful light. Even more so, funnily enough, when you go into the desert, like, so just east of Los Angeles, you get into the desert. The light there is absolutely incredible. But honestly, I don't know whether that wasn't the reason. That certainly wasn't the reason we came here. It's a combination. It's a quick story, but it's a combination of kind of personal life plan and then business opportunity, whereby my wife's Australian. I don't know if you've ever met Lara, but our plan was to move to Australia. She grew up on the beach and wanted that life for our children. Mm. And so our plan was to open a mystery office in Sydney. And I went backwards and forwards several times and had lots of meetings and got a lot of positive kind of feedback, but didn't actually have any clients there. We did decide that, this is what we were going to do. But in the meantime, we just started picking up a couple of, or 2 or 3 clients in the US, all of which said, hey, you should consider having an office out here, because we can't find anybody that has your approach, the approach that, that you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah. This
kind of strategic branding approach to interior concepts. I said, well, I just thought, well, I'd never even thought of America as a place to live, because, green cards are so difficult to get, and, just didn't think it was an option. And LA particularly was not even on my list, because I just thought of it as kind of gang warfare, earthquakes, and smog.
Yes.
And my client said, look, why don't you just tack on a few days on the end of your trip and just go and check it out? You go to Santa Monica. He said, if I could live anywhere in the world, I'd live in Santa Monica. So I said, okay. And I came out and I met some really great people, and they showed me around, and I have to admit, it kind of completely opened my eyes. There's nothing like what I expected. None of those things. It's just like a sort of, it's just a really wonderful beach city that's connected to LA. So it's like, being in a suburb of London, like, Hampstead, but instead of having the hills, you've got the beach. And so, or it's not, is that fact, it's a bit more like being in Kensington because it's a bit more urban than Hampstead. It's like being in Kensington with a beach.
Yes.
And yeah, it was pretty lovely. So I went back to my wife and said, look, I know we're moving to Sydney at the end of the year, but what would you say if we move to LA instead? And to my huge surprise, she was well up for it. So with those three clients and the support of my wife, and the idea of a kind of life change for our family with, more of a kind of outdoor beach life for the boys to grow up in, we made the decision. And yeah, it's definitely been full of huge challenges. Moving a family halfway around the world whilst you still have a business running in London definitely presented its challenges. But overall, it's really exciting. Still, even 7 years later, I kind of have to pinch myself. Like there's just pure blue sky outside right now, and it's like that kind of 9 days out of 10 or 19 days out of 20. Yeah. The effect that has on the culture is amazing. People's positivity here is off the charts. And from a business perspective, what I find is that meeting people is so easy. When in London, if you wanted to target a particular client, a business, to try and get through the various gatekeepers to get to that person and then to maybe meet with them at some point, I always felt was, a kind of 6-month process at minimum. Anyway, here, typically, if you get an introduction or you sort of reach out to somebody, they will meet you that week. Right. Because it's such an opportunistic culture. Nobody wants to miss an opportunity. So, okay.
Yeah, I was wondering about the differences. And you described that, you were being told that there was no one with your approach out there from a design point of view, but also I suppose that there's differences in the way business is conducted. Are they Americans more entrepreneurial? Like you say, don't want to miss an opportunity.
Definitely more opportunistic. Like there's a sort of fear of missing out for sure. So they'll have a meeting. It doesn't mean to say that even if it's a really positive meeting, that it'll translate into a project or into a commission. But you obviously getting the meeting and having that sort of discussion is a massive step towards that goal. And so yeah, I think that's probably the best word for it. There is an entrepreneurial culture, but there's also, frankly, quite a nice, a refreshing, slower pace of business life. In that, certainly on the west side of LA, when I first got here, I couldn't fathom how kind of relaxed everybody was about just culturally, about their sort of work ethic. So if you come here with a London work ethic, you can and you keep that, you can really get twice as much done as everybody else.
Right. Yeah. Have you still got your London work ethic then?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I don't think that'll ever go.
Yeah. Well, there's maybe something about the southwest of places. I'm down in the southwest of Britain, in Devon. It's definitely a slower pace of life. Maybe there's a bit of that down in the southwest of the USA.
Yeah, I think there is. I think, yeah, I'm not sure. Like, for example, I'm sure that's not the case in New York. New York reminds me so much of London in that sort of energy and the pace. But definitely over here, it's not unusual for people to be surfing first thing in the morning and start a little later and then maybe work later. The sort of urgency is less prevalent, I think.
Yeah, is that like kind of work-life balance is a bit more?
Yeah, for a lot of people, for sure. And I think it's also potentially maybe that is a generational thing as well. Younger people placing more importance on experience and work-life balance potentially, and that sort of flexible working arrangement, which means that you can kind of work from anywhere at any time, and whether it's the middle of the night or whether it's kind of during the day, it doesn't seem to make any difference. Like the people I work with, you can email anybody at any time of night and you'll almost always get a reply straight away. It's quite bizarre.
Right.
But that's not because of a sense of urgency. That's just because that's now become the norm of kind of communications, you know.
People are connected by default, aren't they, all the
Yeah,
time? Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
I hope I didn't wake you up this morning when I sent my email, which would have
No.
arrived in the middle of the night.
No, don't worry about that. I do put my phone on silent when I'm asleep.
Yeah, it's good to know. One thing I wanted to just talk to you about was, the process of creating these spaces, which are very kind of full on, almost theatrical, and how often it's everything in the space has been decided upon. It's something I've been looking at in terms of branded spaces and retail areas where essentially you've got a concrete shell that gets transformed into whatever you want it to be. It's totally themed. It has no relationship to the building. Everything's sort of inserted. What are your thoughts on that as a process, and where does the host building come into play? Is that something you're considering?
Yeah, I mean, the host building definitely has a big impact. We've just finished a hotel on Venice Beach called the Venice V Hotel. And a really long-term project, actually. It's been going on for years. And it is a 36-room boutique kind of property. But it's one of what's rare about it from a property perspective on the West Coast is that it's, a brick building. And that it's over 100 years old, which if you've got a building that's over 100 years old here, it gets a plaque.
Yeah.
Which is kind of still astonishing to me, but yeah, so this quirky brick built building kind of lent itself to a very specific approach. Perhaps it's a good example to talk about because you're talking about kind of everything that goes into it, but it's the starting point, it goes back to what we were talking about before, having this really clear brand vision. So the first thing we did was kind of define exactly what this hotel is going to be and who is it for. And it's for the kind of creative class, effectively. It's for people looking to be in the center, right in the heart of Venice, overlooking the ocean, that maybe they're for a weekend getaway, or might be there for work, but again, that creative class and the way they work is so different. So every room, for example, has a desk, and it's on wheels so that you can move it, you can roll it around to the window if you want to sit in the window and have the beach in front of you, or if you want to kind of get away from that and kind of not be distracted. And so understanding who it's for and how they might use the space, we decided that what's really important, is culturally, Venice is at a kind of turning point as a city, as a beach city. It's sort of in a transition. We've sort of coined this phrase as sort of renaissance in a way, because it started out life, 100 years ago as a vision of this guy, Abbot Kinney, who created this sort of vacation destination to mimic Venice in Italy. And he had built canals, and they had gondolas, and they had a sort of mini version of St. Mark's Square with colonnades. And it was a huge success. But sadly, in the middle of the 20th century, it fell into kind of terrible recession and became a kind of overrun by gangs, and was almost lawless, depending on who you talk to. But there's lots of stories of kind of lawlessness, and police have even avoided the area. And then from there, artists and creatives came and squatted some of the empty houses, and built this kind of very artist-led community, and it became the kind of arts district unofficially, for a few decades, but leading up to kind of, I guess, the beginning of the 21st century. And it still has to this day the kind of very artistic temperament, and it has the leftovers of kind of that bohemian lifestyle, but it's also in the last 10-15 years becoming gentrified, and people are really sort of reinvesting in the area, and it's become a kind of it's become a very, very, very sought after area, considering it has this enormous beach, it was actually very, very, very affordable for a long time. Now it's just through the roof. But so this renaissance is, what we were trying to do with this hotel is bring a sense of the artistic, soul of the area, because along the boardwalk of the beach, loads of artists set up their stalls there. And it's almost like sort of a gallery where you can go and buy their art from the artist, there and then. So and around Venice, it's covered in, the buildings are, there's a lot of street art all over the place. It's a very urban environment considering it's right by a beach. And we wanted to kind of capture that spirit, really, that renegade maverick spirit, that artistic temperament, and allow people from outside to come in and kind of experience it less like a hotel and more like they're actually kind of living there, even if they're just for a couple of days. And so with that kind of vision in mind, you can already start to see how that might influence what you put in each room and how you create each room. We wanted to tell the story of Venice and the different aspects of it. So we have 3 different room styles. One is called, we've kind of coined beach boho, which is this sort of artist's residence, kind of in this sort of very bohemian style that's kind of very prevalent here. Then there's what we call the Dogtown room, which is inspired by the skateboarding movement that took off here in sort of the Santa Monica, Venice area, that they've coined Dogtown. And right opposite the hotel on the beach is this massive skateboarding park which you can see from many of the windows. And so having a kind of skateboarding kind of vibe to the hotel is kind of very differentiated, because most hotels on the beach in California, up and down the coast, tend to have a kind of surf vibe to them, because that's the kind of cliche. So it kind of differentiated itself and kind of becomes more interesting and more authentic to the actual location. And then the final room is the artist room, which is this sort of melancholic, writer's den, kind of den of iniquity, this dark and luxurious space. So that we have 3 very, very different room styles to encourage people to explore and come back and try different and have different experiences each time. But also because the last thing that would work in Venice, if you were trying to personify what the Venice character is to have a kind of modular room format.
Yeah.
That would feel very corporate and wouldn't be right for that. I mean, if that had been the vision, then for sure. But our vision was to kind of reflect the spirit of Venice. That
concept's been developed based on the narrative that you've researched and is inherent in the location.
Yeah. And when you go there in the lobby, one of the things I'm most proud of is we created a installation, a massive kind of 5 by 5 meter installation of skateboard wheels in different colors, and each wheel is a pixel of an image of a portrait of Abbot Kinney, the founder of Venice.
Oh my God!
He looks like a classic modern day hipster.
Yeah,
which is what's so funny.
Yeah, all those wheels. I love skateboard wheels. I had a rollerblade wheel on one of my pieces of furniture when I was at college. That was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like.
Very cool.
How nice. So that's really got strong roots with the location. What interests me is those sort of spaces that transport you into kind of almost like a fantasy land. It's a bit like, the Hollister stores in the UK, where you walk through the door and suddenly you're in some kind of, you're inside some house that is somewhere exotic,
Yeah.
And that sort of transformational, that's sort of what you're in many ways doing, is taking people to different places, aren't you?
Yeah.
Through the door. I do always show my students the Zaza bizarre images of in Bristol, which is it's been around for such a long time now. It seems, one of your earlier projects where it is just like being transported to some holiday destination in the Far East, isn't it? I mean, that
was inspired by those Asian night markets and the
Yeah.
kind of overwhelming kind of feelings of sensory overload is kind of what is the experience we were trying to recreate there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is about escapism, I think. A lot of it, if you think about entertainment, leisure, and how people behave, really people are looking for an escape, whether it's through hospitality, whether it's through music, whether it's through sport, whether it's through travel, whether it's through drinking or cannabis. There is an element of just being transported somewhere else, right? For that moment, that relief from your everyday life. And I think that is what we're providing a lot of the time through the work that I've done over the years, is that kind of relief, is that moment of escape, that short time when you're in the bar that reminds you of, like an Asian night market, or it might be something from the 30s, for example. That is kind of one of the that's part of the experience that we're providing, isn't it? It's that kind of that sense of escapism.
Yeah,
I think it's really, really powerful.
And that sense, we were talking about memory earlier. It's creating those memories, but also evoking those memories, isn't it? Through association or imagery or the sense of atmosphere.
Yeah. I mean, we try and be as evocative as we can if it's appropriate. And I think, for example, one very powerful emotive trigger for a lot of people is nostalgia. And so you'll see sort of running theme through some of our work is this sort of retro, feel. Again, it's a sort of, it's you might not be traveling through space, but traveling through time and escaping to a different era is still a powerful, it's a really powerful trigger for people. We've always tried to find the line between creating a brand experience or a customer experience rather that is transformative, but also that is not themed. So it's kind of, and I think that where is that line? That line is very often just down to kind of the quality and authenticity of the intention and the execution.
Yeah.
If it's done really well, the theme becomes a concept, and if it's not done very well, the concept just becomes a theme place, and then it just people's their sense of, a bit like in a play or a movie, once that your belief, you suspended your disbelief rather, right? If you stop suspending your disbelief, then it all falls flat. And it's the same with, I think, interior experiences for customers.
Yeah. I think looking at the work, it looks like you're having fun doing it. There's so much. I'm hoping you're having fun. We
definitely make it a policy that we must have fun on every project.
Right, we do.
I know it sounds ridiculous, but yeah, we do. We work. We've always had a philosophy. In fact, an ex-colleague of mine, Greg, brought it up recently on a LinkedIn post about working with nice people for nice people. And that's been at the fundamental of how we've chosen who we work with, but also choosing projects that we can have fun with. I think humor is another massive emotive trigger, and I honestly believe that the more fun we have putting into it, the more fun people will have on the other side. I feel like it translates through to the end user.
Yeah, definitely. I think it looks like you've got a sense of humor, and it's like it's not been taken too seriously, but it's been executed very seriously, if you know what I mean. It's like well considered. Everything in it is there for a reason. You've got such a wide range, of course, but some of the projects where there's like, I'm just looking at them scrolling through here, the beach bar, the sort of Jamaican barbecue hut, everything you've got there looks like it's been selected for a reason. And I think that's the thing that really pulls it all together. It's so coherent across the board.
I mean, you're just summing up how we like to approach it, how I've always wanted to approach it, and that's our aim. That to create this sort of coherent a coherent interior scheme that works with the food that you're eating, the cocktails that you're drinking, the branding, the music that you're listening to. That, in fact, that's a great example that you bring up. Dub Jam, which was, this Jamaican rum shack barbecue, was sort of culmination of years of kind of conceptualizing and being a massive fan of reggae, and having worked on over 100 album covers for Trojan Records, and really helped that brand kind of evolve, and wanting to create an experience for customers to come and hear the music and eat and drink the music as well, if you like, and feel it. So that in that space, we actually had a massive kind of sound system mounted on the wall with, bunch of speakers, so that it's aimed at the front door, so that as you walked in, you literally felt the bass sort of resonating through your chest. And that was important to me, because you're literally being shaken out of whatever it was you were thinking about a moment ago, walking down the street, in London, and your daily problems and issues. You step in, and the first thing you feel transports you somewhere, and makes you forget about the problems that you've just been thinking about. We definitely try and think about every element, not just the design, because we very often now work and design the menus with our clients. So help them define, the brand vision doesn't just extend to the look and feel of the interior scheme. It extends to the menu, what sort of food we're serving, what sort of cocktails, and how that's all presented as well. In Dub Jam, it was all presented on, these chalkboards, because it wanted to feel like it was a very today's menu, not like a sort of corporate printed menu that doesn't change for months on end.
Yeah, that's great, isn't it? We've done an hour and a bit.
I've got to hop in a minute, actually. I've got another call.
No worries. I think we've got loads there, Dan. That's really good. It's 6:23 in the UK, and my partner will be wanting her food and beverage experience delivered to her soon.
Very good. Very good segue. I'll leave you to it in that case.
I'm going to have to go and do the business. I'd like to thank Dan for taking the time to talk to me. It's really nice to listen to his thought process and how he puts the consumers at the centre of the process and thinks of brands as people, and creates the personalities to attract and retain the loyalty and custom of its target market. His approach to developing the core brand values and the brand identity of his clients' businesses, and the way in which he translates that into three-dimensional space with the use of materials, colours, graphics, textures and patterns, has proved hugely successful in creating a number of well-recognised and successful businesses. Understanding a business from the consumer's perspective and creating the experience that will leave long-lasting memories has enabled him to develop a range of spaces that have personality and atmosphere and really connect with users through all of their senses. This approach is something that we are promoting at the University of Plymouth on our interior design course. Our students are going through the process of sensory mapping and understanding the psychological impact of design, and learning how to develop spaces to really maximise the experience and make resonating connections with the target markets of their concepts. If you'd like to know how to be a kick-ass interior designer, follow the links to our course at the University of Plymouth in the notes. Thanks to Dave Clark from I Am The How for production support and invaluable advice in the setting up of this podcast. Kay Hansen for her planning support and co-hosting for these and our educational podcasts at the University of Plymouth. And Mark Frith for the music. I was very pleased to hear this week that the Multi-Story Thinking podcast on interior design is ranked number 28 in the top 60 interior design podcasts produced by FeedSpot. There's links in the notes to the full list, where amongst my podcasts, there's 59 other fantastic opportunities to learn more about the interior design world, so check that out and see what you can find out. I'd really like to hear your feedback on the podcast. Leave a comment or get in touch via the website. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.